Emperor Zidika pinned Ray down, furious, without asking why a slave knew his name. Despite this, Ray remained defiant, calling out the name. "Didn't you hear me? Kill me instead. Do you have this kind of fetish? I'm a man, you pervert. Let me go." However, with his weak body, Ray was easily overpowered by Zidika, making his mind hazy. He felt helpless. Previous life, Ray was the Crown Prince Len Not of the Chat Empire. At that time, he was 8 years older than Crown Prince Zik of the Eobasar Empire. Today was the signing of the truce agreement between the two empires. Len Not proactively shook hands with Zidika. "We hope this agreement will last long. See you again if there's an opportunity." Zidika and his entourage prepared to return to Strat. Eric, the youngest prince of Strat, served tea to help Len Not sleep better after 3 sleepless nights for the truce agreement. The Emperor of Strat had 12 princes, all of whom Len Not had killed to secure the throne. Edrix, feeling pity and seeing Eric as no threat, made him Len Not's close subordinate. At 16, Eric appeared childish and weak, but he had admirable swordsmanship skills. With further training, he could become a sword master. To avoid being killed by Len Not, Eric hid his swordsmanship abilities. However, Len not only encouraged him to train but also had no suspicions. After drinking the tea, Len Not felt dizzy and vomited blood. He had been poisoned. Suspecting Eric's betrayal, after Len Not's death, the Crown Prince was reborn as a slave named Ray in the enemy empire Eobasar. He retained his intelligence and memories from his past life. Day's family served under the noble Vincenzo, who was fair and just, making his slaves generally content. Despite being reborn into a slave family, Day was happy and led a peaceful life. One night, all the beautiful female slaves were gathered, with Day being the only boy. They were all bathed and dressed in soft silk clothes. Looking at himself in the mirror, Day realized he looked just like in his past life and would grow into the same figure in a few years. A servant revealed, "A high-ranking person is coming. If they choose you, you'll escape the life of a slave and live comfortably." Understanding why he was summoned, Day, who had previously been interested in embracing men a few times, was now worried about being dominated, nervously looking for a way to escape. He was shocked when he saw the person in front of him and blurted out, "Zidika Vassar." Horrified, Zidika asked, "How dare you call the Emperor's name?" Furious, Zidika ordered his men to kneel Day down and interrogated him. Without fear, Day stared back at Zidika and said, "Just kill me already." Amused by Ray's audacity, Zidika ordered everyone out, leaving the two alone in the room. Zidika advised Day to recognize his status and behave properly. Day insisted, "Kill me." Enraged, Zidika slapped Day, who angrily tried to hit back but was easily overpowered and pinned to the bed, his hands tied. Zidika interrogated him, but how could Ray explain that he had died and been reborn with past life memories? Zidika continued to torment Day all night. Ray could feel his own excitement rising as his strength dwindled until he passed out. Zidika, curious about Ray, wondered if the slave was merely trying to catch his attention with his defiance. Yet, there was something about Ray that reminded him of someone. Day awoke, his whole body aching. Angrily, he blamed himself for enduring such humiliation as a lowly slave. Despite serving under a kind-hearted count, slaves still had to obey their masters, living worse than animals. Seeing her son awake, Day's mother joyfully hugged him. Day reassured her that he was fine. At that moment, a soldier of the Emperor arrived to bring Day to Zidika. Frustrated, Day said, "Let go. I can walk on my own." The soldier, infuriated by Day's arrogance, grabbed him roughly and scolded him. Christian, the Swiss guard captain, appeared and ordered the soldier to stop causing trouble and quickly take Day to the Emperor. Impressed by Christian's upright posture and strong presence, Zidika ordered Ray to sit on the bed and wait. Defiant, Day refused to obey, prompting Zidika to drag him over and push him onto the bed. If you don't want to be tied up again, then you better behave, Reed. The wound check from the previous night didn't go well, despite having all the necessary supplies. Reed continued to interrogate, asking who Day was and who had taught him. Day insisted that he had never learned from anyone, but Reed didn't believe him because they had thoroughly investigated Day's background. They knew Day was the child of a pair of servant slaves who served Vincenzo. 5 people had witnessed Day's birth and knew that he had never left the slave quarters since then. Knowing the emperor's name was impossible. Day speculated he might belong to a professional assassin group, but Reed switched to another form of torture that left Day trembling. Day mocked and worried about LFE's future, which only made Reed more forceful. I have 5 sons and daughters. You worry needlessly, Reed kissed Day and reassured him. As long as you behave, nothing will happen. Reed asked again, who is behind you? But Day remained silent. Reed decided to bring in that, and ordered someone to bring a chain, then personally locked it onto Day's leg. Reed threatened that if Day still didn't talk, they would interrogate his parents and the other slaves, which could lead to a bloodbath at Vincenzo's fortress. Day remembered his past life as a cold-blooded crown prince of the Chat Empire but now felt torn because of the slaves. Day sat in a daze, while Reed gently caressed his face, then left, allowing Day to rest. Day checked his ability to escape with the chain on his leg. Walking was manageable but running was difficult. Day planned to leave for the royal palace, intending to stow away on a cargo wagon when Christian intervened. Christian insisted on accompanying Day, and they rode in the same carriage with the emperor. 10 days later, they arrived at the Eofexer Palace, where they were welcomed by the empress and other royals, including Princess Brussels, daughter of Duke Maxi, and Crown Prince Chirac. Princess Brussels was the daughter of Duke Maxi, a powerful family that helped Reed ascend to the throne. Crown Prince Chirac was her son, and she had been ambitious about his position since before Reed's rise. However, Reed showed no interest, claiming fatigue and retiring to his room, leaving Day temporarily relieved. With his parents and other slaves at Vincenzo safe, Day could relax for now. A servant brought food to Day's room, but the soup was bland, and the beef was tough. Reed silently observed Day, then commented on his dining etiquette. Day explained that, as an assassin, he needed to be knowledgeable about such matters, a skill he had from his past life. Admitting to being the crown prince of the great empire would only make him seem insane and likely lead to his tongue being cut off. Day washed up and rested, enjoying a rare moment of peace. Reed woke him up, easily overpowering his resistance. Reed admitted he had become too fond of Day's body. Day, confined to the palace, had little to do besides eat and sleep. Bored, Day ordered the servants to bring wine and a lavish feast. In his past life, Day never drank for fear of being stabbed in his drunken state. Reed returned to find the mess but merely smiled and patted Day's head. Day killed time by examining documents on Reed's desk and almost corrected them but hesitated. Reed returned, sarcastically noting if assassination organizations now taught document handling. Reed tasked Day with correcting the documents, promising not to touch him that night if he complied. Day found some enjoyment in writing again after a long time. Reed revealed that Baron Barroom, skilled in financial matters, was considered for promotion but belonged to Marquis Vihangden, whose conversion to Reed's side would be contentious. Reed honored the ceasefire agreement, and Day, though it was difficult, requested permission to leave. Reed refused, citing the danger of revealing Day's true identity. Reed then ordered Day to disrobe, which he reluctantly did. Day reminisced about his past life as Len Noth, the 9th Prince of Strath, a genius in many fields. Despite his efforts to avoid the throne, his brother's schemes forced him to act ruthlessly. He only wanted to survive, just as his brothers did, and saw it as destiny. Reed's soldiers discovered an 8-year-old prince hiding in the bushes, whom Reed decided to care for. Day, now back in the present, noticed Reed looking tense and suggested a chess game. Reed, determined not to lose, eventually won a match, mirroring the intense power dynamics in their relationship. Crown Prince Chirac, unable to meet Reed, confronted Day out of jealousy. Reed did not intend to pass the throne to Shirok due to his lack of talent and moral quality, despite his mother's powerful support. Day, remembering his own father's pragmatic approach to ruling, saw similarities between the two rulers. Day's month-long stay in the palace, still shackled, involved handling documents and plotting escape. He grew familiar with the palace layout, though Christian and others watched closely. Summoned by the Empress, Day faced another round of humiliation, where Christian's timely intervention saved him from further harm. In the end, Day endured the palace's complex power plays, scheming, and his struggles with Reed's dominance, holding on to his past life skills and memories to navigate the treacherous environment. This shirt suits you so well that it's a pity to take it off. I feel like something big is about to happen. For you, I reluctantly went to the party, but you have no conscience, Azuket said, slightly raising his hand. Are you really reluctant? Getting involved with a scoundrel and now you're stuck. Clearly, I only went because you persuaded me. Have some conscience and let me go. Azuket whispered, pressing closer to him. Aren't you ashamed? But I never said I wouldn't touch you today. Today, I'll make you really happy. Zitk uttered many other vulgar words, making Day's face turn pale. Azuket suddenly lifted Ray up and kissed his face all over. This time, I won't hurt you. Relax. Azuket's actions were even more crude than before. However, Day was the one embarrassed, not Azuket. The man kept calling Day's name continuously, making him get goosebumps under Azuket's pressure until Day fainted. Azuket kept caressing and looking at Ray, then mumbled, "In your next life, you'll call me by the name I chose." Day felt pleased and announced, "It's time to admit I'm a master of strategy games." Then he said, "I have to go now, you should go back too." 2 months after that party, the confrontation with Empress Brussels and the Grand Vizier had begun. Azuket left early every morning and returned late at night. Day had been forbidden from going out for 2 weeks now. Day guessed that, in such chaotic times, they couldn't let a suspicious person like him out. Day didn't intend to ask about the situation of Chirac or the Empress when passing by the magic tower. The idea of approaching the tower to steal the magic stone resurfaced. Day made an excuse to get out again. "I have nothing to do. Lately, I've just been in the room, so I'm very idle." Azuket seized the opportunity. "Then I'll increase the number of documents for you to handle." Day screamed, "That's not what I meant. Let me see the sunlight, do anything outside. If you prevent me, I'd rather die." Realizing he was too agitated, Day tried to calm down. "Just pretend you didn't hear anything." Seeing Ray's awkwardness, Azuket decided to comply with his wish. At the same time, seeing the Swiss team practicing, Azuket decided to give Ray 3 days of sword training under supervision and without leaving the grounds. Though puzzled by Azuket allowing him to practice swordsmanship, Day was happy to seize the opportunity and approached Azuket, challenging him. "If I become proficient and harm you, what then?" Azuket calmly replied, "Don't worry, though I may lose to you in chess, I won't lose in a sword fight." Ray grabbed Azuket suddenly, asking, "If that's the case, can I learn something else?" Day hesitated. "Magic," Azuket sternly said, "not permitted. You can't fool me. What do you really want to do outside?" Day laughed awkwardly. "I just thought about it because I wanted to learn something new." Day wanted to learn magic because he would be given a magic stone, and with it, his weak body could regain all the past strength. The overwhelming helplessness would finally be over. The power of the magic stone could affect an entire nation. This isn't something to casually give to a slave, so choose either sword training or nothing, Azuket insisted. Not wanting to miss this rare opportunity, Day said, "Fine, let me practice swordsmanship." Just holding the sword and swinging it a few times made Ray exhausted. Having been reincarnated, his swordsmanship skills and reflexes were the same, but due to his weak muscles and stamina, even moving the sword correctly felt heavy. Day collapsed to the ground, feeling pathetic. It's pathetic to be caught off guard like this, he thought, recalling the times of being trained by Christian, and how the team leader Chris evaluated him. Day laughed. You have the skills of someone with years of experience, but without the muscle or stamina. Everything doesn't add up. Day chuckled. After your evaluation, let's continue training. Repeating the horizontal / 100 times. Right? Christian pointed out a stance correction and performed a powerful strike, creating a formidable force. Day, stunned, tried to imitate Christian's movements, though exerting too much force made his hand ache. But the result made Ray smile with happiness. How was it? Not bad, right? Christian praised, exceeds expectations. Even the usually silent observer said, with such progress in a few years, he might become a master swordsman. Day, not being modest at all, said, once I've decided, there's nothing I can't achieve. Day remembered, Giết is a master swordsman. Isn't he? Another person proudly said. His Majesty became a master swordsman at his coming-of-age ceremony. Careful with your words, Azakit warned. Though Day had heard that Giết was a master swordsman, he had never seen it. Azakit, usually seen with a pile of documents, had learned and mastered all techniques just by observing. This was his innate talent. Day admitted that Giết was extraordinarily capable. I heard Emperor Eric was also a formidable master swordsman, Day said. It's rumored, but since Emperor Eric hasn't been in battle, who knows? If he were like Prince Levanos, known for his magic in battles, I might believe it. But Levin died before you were born, so you wouldn't know. He was the only level 4 mage in the world, Azakit said. Christian froze, staring at Day. At that time, Ray was an adult in his 20s, different from the current Ray. Britain had only met Ray once during a treaty signing. 9 days passed, with Day diligently training, slightly improving his stamina, though his mind always yearned for the magic stone. Seeing Day staring at the magic tower, Christian asked, "What's in the tower?" "I'm just curious about the magic stone," Day replied. "You mentioned wanting to learn magic to His Majesty, right?" "Yes, I want to learn magic more than swordsmanship," Day said. Prince Chi-Rak, hearing this, angrily asked, "Who are you to learn swordsmanship, you lowly slave?" His Majesty must have lost his mind. Realizing Chi-Rak's change, Day politely bowed. "Your Highness, please go first." Chi-Rak, trying to provoke Day, was ignored, which made him furious. "Do you know who I am? I'm asking you, what are you doing here?" "I'm looking at the magic tower," Day replied. Chi-Rak scoffed. "Do you think a slave like you can step into the magic tower? It's incredibly mysterious. I even saw a flying broom there." Day thought, using a magic stone for such childish tricks. Day replied, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Chi-Rak, thinking Day doubted him, shouted, "You don't believe me? Follow me. I'll show you." Recognizing his chance, Day followed Chi-Rak to the magic tower. "Hurry up. I'll show you," Chi-Rak said excitedly. Day was reported to Azakit, who tried to stop them but couldn't disobey the prince. Despite his eagerness, Day tried not to show it. Chi-Rak ordered the mages, "Make the broom fly or I'll behead you all." Frightened, the mages complied, using a magic stone to make the broom hover. Seeing this, Chi-Rak boasted, "See that? Normally, you'd never see this in your life. Today it was just a childish trick." Day pretended to be impressed, saying, "Yes, it's amazing," though everyone could see he wasn't interested. Chi-Rak, noticing Day's lack of enthusiasm, became dejected, asking, "What makes you different? You're a lowly slave, yet you know so much. Is that why His Majesty likes you? If I were like you, would His Majesty accept me?" Day felt pity for Chi-Rak but wanted to stay away from him, as his tragic fate was inevitable. Day pushed Chi-Rak away and lunged for the magic stone. Suddenly, Giết burst into the tower, grabbing Ray and throwing him down. "You scoundrel," Azakit said, restraining Ray and ordering, "Tie him up." Despite Ray's protests of innocence, He was tied up and taken away. Azakit scolded Chi-Rak. Why did you bring him here? Didn't I say he's not allowed in the tower? Day, pretending ignorance, asked, what's happening? Azakit, frustrated, held Ray's shirt tightly. What are you up to? Who are you really? You keep asking. I'm Ray, a slave from Vinox City. Is there something wrong with that? Day responded. Azakit, looking stern, replied, do you know what happens to real slaves? You'll see. With that, Azakit ripped Ray's shirt and pressed his foot down on him. Day, angry, thought, do you want to humiliate me? Fine, do as you wish if you see me only as a slave. Azakit looked into Ray's eyes and suddenly hugged him tightly, saying, why do I feel this way? The humiliation of a slave, is it really that important? Day questioned, why does an emperor run to the tower just because a slave is there? Look at me, who do you think I am? Azakit stared at Ray, then unexpectedly kissed him. This is an annual event. After returning, the matter of Duke Massey will be addressed. Day was surprised and asked again, you mean you're taking me out of the palace too? If I leave you here, the Empress might eat you alive out of excitement. The Swordmaster, someone who reaches the highest level in every era, has never exceeded 5 people. Whenever a Swordmaster appears, they attract the attention of the entire world, and the nation's status increases. Being a Swordmaster is of great significance for LFE Zidbek, who used all his abilities and strength to eliminate demonic creatures and protect the people after ascending the throne. The people of Io are proud of their emperor. These demon hunts are personally supervised by Zik, and it's an important event to elevate the royal family's status and to show LFE's position competing with Strath. This year's hunt officially begins after 10 years. The event has become more ceremonial, but everyone fights seriously. Zik fiercely draws his sword, slicing deep from the chest to the shoulder of a monster, spraying red blood everywhere. Day did not participate in the fight but watched others kill the demons. Seeing a magician holding a magic stone, Day became interested and curious about the level of magicians in Io. A group of demons surrounded the magicians, who chanted spells, and dozens of magic stones created a large amount of magical attacks, exploding and slaughtering the demons. Day assessed it as excellent. The power of coordination truly belongs to the elite army of the royal family. Chi-Rak mocked, what does a slave know to boast? Day asked, what's the matter this time? Chi-Rak became furious and stormed off, leaving Day helpless. This boy shows no signs of growing up, always remaining a crown prince. Although Chi-Rak was qualified to participate, his lack of ability and for his safety, Duke Massey used his power to insert more than half of his men into the army. Day, disheartened, thought, if that guy becomes the emperor of Io, this country has no future. Count Rumsford approached Day, who is the commander of the magician team and a reputedly excellent magician. Is there something you need? Rumsford took out a handkerchief and handed it to Day, who wondered why. Noticing nothing? Take it and quickly go to His Majesty. He will be pleased, Rumsford instructed, smiling happily. Use it to wipe blood off your armor, and sweat too. Then return. Day refused, handing back the handkerchief, saying, thanks, but I won't follow through. Rumsford was surprised when Christian stepped forward, saying, this intervention is unnecessary. Day was surprised by Christian's reaction. Christian, acting protectively, further told Count Dung Fo not to underestimate Day anymore. Soldiers reported they had wiped out all the demons in one day. Feeling something was off, Day decided to speak up. I know this place isn't for me. The density of these demons suggests we need to reassess their living scale, as they might attack unexpectedly and endanger the Emperor. Zik, assuring everything was being investigated, mentioned that sometimes meticulous preparation could reduce damage. The next day, while marching uphill with chained feet, Day quickly became exhausted. Zik noticed and asked if Day was tired, suggesting he rest and wait. Day, considering escape but too exhausted to form a plan, suddenly found Zik wiping his sweat and pinching his cheek, advising him to be careful. Day, annoyed, turned away. Zik smiled and ordered the soldiers to move on. Chi-Rak's men grumbled about Day being favored by the emperor. The army continued fighting demons, with knights and magicians cooperating effectively. Suddenly, Chi-Rak drew his sword and charged towards the ongoing battle, his escort warning of the danger. Ignoring them, Chi-Rak insisted on helping. Distracted by his action, a monster seized the opportunity to attack a knight, grabbed Chi-Rak by the neck, lifting him off the ground. Day screamed, trying to rescue him but was hindered by the chain. Chi-Rak was taken, creating a heavy atmosphere. Zik ordered all demons to be exterminated before sunset. Ruling out a search for Chi-Rak due to manpower constraints, Chi-Rak's men grumbled about Day's favoritism from the emperor. Day wielded his sword, directly blocking the attack from the Ritz. "Do you think you can defeat a master swordsman in close combat?" he taunted. Despite his confident words, Day knew he couldn't hold out much longer. He smiled briefly before disappearing from the Ritz's view and reappearing behind them, a ball of fire forming in his hand. "Of course, I can handle it," he said. Zik was surprised and turned to look. Before Risket could react, the fireball exploded on his back. Though he leaned to avoid it, he was still burned by the explosion's aftermath. Day gritted his teeth. A child living a leisurely life hunting monsters. Wind whirled around them as ZYKK raised his sword in defense, having fought on dozens of battlefields. Day had never seen anyone survive his attacks, but now the Ritz realized his sword's aura was no longer effective. Day prepared to deliver the final blow. Just then, Chi-Rak charged in from behind. Ritz was caught off guard but decided not to dodge, instead channeling more power into his sword. Before Day could activate his spell, he stood still. In a split second, Christian rushed at him, delivering a powerful kick to his stomach, sending him flying 4 to 5 meters. With his frail body, the force of Christian's kick left Day dazed and nearly unconscious. After the intense battle, Zik stood gasping, staring at the magic stone recovered from Day. He called out, waking Zika from his daze. "Your Majesty, order his execution. Day has committed a grave crime by attempting to attack and assassinate the Emperor. Moreover, the injury and severe damage caused are clear and witnessed by everyone. Imprison him." By sunset, everything was arranged, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Don Fu saw Christian sitting silently, his face rigid. Don Fu forced a smile, gently patting Christian on the shoulder. "You saved His Majesty again. You'll receive another medal." Christian replied coldly, "It's just my duty." Don Fu muttered, "What will happen today?" Christian snapped. He attempted to assassinate His Majesty. He must be executed immediately. "Do you really think that?" Don Fu asked. With Rei's abilities, he could have seriously injured His Majesty, but he stopped. "You saw it too. So, do you want to side with Day?" "Don't twist the truth," Don Fu protested. Count Rungford approached. "Is there something you want to say about Day?" "No," Christian said wearily. "Not about the criminal who tried to assassinate His Majesty." Count Rungford persisted. "You all saw it clearly, didn't you?" He chanted a 4-layer spell, not 3. "How is that possible? Only one person in the continent's history could do that. Len Not Van Trat. I heard the Crown Prince resembles that criminal. Perhaps there's a connection." A fragment of memory resurfaced in Christian's mind. He murmured, "Len Not Van Trat." Day groaned in extreme pain, his ribs broken. He wished for unconsciousness to escape the agony. Day wondered why he had done such a foolish thing. In truth, he knew the reason but didn't want to admit it. He had been moved by the current situation. If the Emperor died, Eofe Soa's status would decline, possibly leading to war. And the image of Risket not retreating to protect Chiok had touched Day's heart. He had come to kill Risket, but his heart faltered. Day angrily punched the ground. This isn't my business. I shouldn't hesitate when necessary. It was ironic that he had told himself this, yet he hesitated when it mattered most. He should have ruthlessly killed Risket to gain his freedom and escape the humiliation of slavery. Now only one chance remained. Day, bruised and in pain, squinted at the approaching figure. Risket stared at him. "Who are you?" Day asked, smiling bitterly. "This is my last chance," he thought. "What I say won't matter. Being reborn as Crown Prince Len not. It sounds like the ramblings of a madman." So, coming to the Imperial City was a gamble because Risket had seen Ray's face many times. If he recognized Day in his final moments, Ray's plan would succeed. Morisk's eyes widened. "Len not Van Trat," he muttered as he heard his name from Risket's mouth for the first time. "You're his son." Day's eyes filled with pain. He laughed bitterly and shouted, "That's absurd. Whose son am I?" After over 10 years of effort, he had become a 4-layer mage. "Do you think it's reasonable for me to chant a 4-layer spell just because I'm his son?" Risket grabbed Day's neck. "If you're just his son, why do you resemble him so much? His face, his personality, his drinking habits. What made you like this? Was it stress? Preparing for Levinad's return? But why are you in Io Feso? Was meeting Cham just a coincidence?" Day's voice trembled. "Stress." He angrily pushed Risket away. "You forced me here. Who are you to call me a genius? Every day, I vomited blood before I succeeded in chanting a 4-layer spell. So who are you? What are you?" Day shouted, trembling. "I've said it all. He really doesn't know." Day thought, "I failed." Risket was a rational man. He dismissed emotions and only accepted evidence-based opinions. "I failed," Day realized. "My plan to expel foreign threats failed because of you. I can't tolerate you any longer. So if you want to live, answer me." As the army returned, rumors about Day spread, labeling him a 4-layer mage and an assassin sent by stress. Despite the fabricated evidence, the assassination attempt on the emperor was real, strengthening the empress's faction. Count Massey declared, "Your Majesty, an evil man from stress has clouded your judgment and intends to harm you. He's a threat. Do you still want to protect him?" Risket remained calm. "We must first find the mastermind," he replied coldly. "You want to kill him without questioning?" Count Massey laughed. "Yes, we must find the mastermind, even if we have to skin or bone him. I hope he doesn't die before revealing the truth. Your Majesty, be cautious." He then visited the Empress. "I've heard, in this critical time, the Emperor remains calm as expected." The Empress, Brussels, slapped the table and shouted, "How is that slave now? I want to interrogate him myself." "He's still being interrogated but is forbidden to meet anyone," Count Massey replied. "He'll eventually die. If the Emperor keeps protecting him, who will trust and follow an emperor blinded by concubines?" The Empress gritted her teeth. "This is divine retribution. He tried to wipe out our family, those loyal to him, and now he's paying the price. Thinking of what he did to Chi-Rak, it breaks my heart." Amidst their laughter, Chi-Rak spoke, "Your Majesty didn't avoid Ray's attack to protect me. Moreover, Ray stopped his attack when he could have delivered a fatal blow." "I saw it," Count Massey angrily said. "Chi-Rak, why do you speak like this? The slave attempted to assassinate His Majesty. He wielded a sword and attacked him. That's the truth." Chi-Rak remained silent, then said, "Your Majesty didn't avoid Ray's attack to protect me. Moreover, Ray stopped his attack when he could have delivered a fatal blow." "I saw it," Count Massey, infuriated, asked, "Why are you so soft-hearted?" Chi-Rak, despite His Majesty's harsh treatment, he still respects his father. Risket descended the stairs to the dungeon. The jailer was startled. "Your Majesty, why are you here alone?" Risket coldly asked, "What's the result?" "He's no ordinary man. We were cautious, but he wouldn't speak. the jailer stammered. Day groaned weakly, tied to a chair, his body covered in bruises from days of torture. Risket was furious. "Did you touch him?" he demanded. He drew his sword and beheaded the jailer in an instant, blood splattering. Day opened his eyes and looked ahead, trembling. "Risket," he murmured. Risket stood there, angry, with a blood-stained sword. The jailer trembled with fear. Risket grabbed Day's collar. "Do you want to die?" Day looked directly at Risket, using all his remaining strength to mock. "Get lost. Do you think I'll live obediently beside you forever?" Risket grabbed Day's hair, pulling his face up. "I know your greatest fear is humiliation. Can you live with the mark of a slave on your body?" Day remained silent, looking down. Risket ordered the jailer to bring a red-hot iron rod. Day's body was covered in both new and old wounds, causing unbearable pain. He couldn't sleep, haunted by the moment the hot iron seared his flesh. Day woke up in Zik's room, relieved to realize he was alive. Risket sneered, "Do you think you've escaped death? Why didn't I imprison you?" "I have my reasons," Day said weakly, but painfully. The men all approached at once. Christian didn't want to hand Ray over to those shady people. He held Ray close. "I'll take Ray away," he said, surprising Chi-Rak, who widened his eyes in shock. However, the urgency of the situation left no room for further conversation. "Then go at most 1 hour. We'll ensure His Majesty doesn't notice the absence of you both," Chi-Rak said, instructing Christian to never return. Chi-Rak stuffed a pouch with a few magical stones for Christian. After that, Christian carried Ray and ran as fast as he could without looking back. When they had traveled quite a distance, Ray woke up and asked, "Where are we?" Christian grasped Ray's hand. "You're free now. However, it's not completely safe yet. If we don't move further away." "What are you talking about? What about Ritcat? What are you doing?" Ray trembled and cried. "I have to go back immediately. If I escape, my parents will be executed, right? No, they might suffer a fate worse than death. I have to return to Ritcat." Christian, angry, shouted, "What? Is that why you've endured all this time? Didn't you once say you could leave your parents behind at any time?" Ray, helpless, pushed Christian's hands away, tears streaming down his face. "They deserve my repayment. There was a time I missed my beautiful homeland, the peaceful bloodshed achieved after killing all my siblings. It was a beautiful homeland, protected by these very hands. But Ray found happiness in the wretchedness of slavery. It made Ray completely forget the bitter memories of the poisoned tea, only remembering the kind people. Exhausted, Ray fainted. Initially, Christian planned to leave before dawn, but the plan failed. Christian returned to Ray's place after wandering to gather firewood. He was overwhelmed by the sight before him. Ray stood proudly in the early morning sun and slowly turned around. With blue eyes, he smiled at Christian. "There you are. Did you bring any magical stones? Does that mean you want to leave? Recently, Tada seems overly emotional." "Do I look ugly?" Ray asked. "Where are we going?" Ray sighed. "Let's go to Stress Edge." Christian remained silent for a moment before asking, "Do you want to return to your homeland?" Ray was surprised but didn't question why Christian mentioned that name. Ray smiled. "My homeland?" Ray lifted his head, taking a deep breath in the early sunlight, his thick hair glistening. Christian was immersed in the stunning scene. "Nothing compares to this," Ray said. "Let's go, Christian." Ray looked around at the mountain scenery, commenting cheerfully, "It looks peaceful, doesn't it?" Christian had just killed a monster, blood splattered everywhere. "Peaceful," he replied proudly, "with fertile fields and well-maintained roads." Despite the many monsters, the royal family's hunting cycles seemed to be setting up good policies. "When I was alive, this country wasn't like this. In just a few years, LFE has become a very livable place." "Of course," Ray retorted, "but now it's over, because Zik continuously supports the Empress's faction. The consequences will soon affect the people. He's destroying the very achievements he built. Ray tried to hide his pain and stood up. Christian immediately supported Ray, though he couldn't hide his frail condition. I'll be better with a little rest. In his current state, Ray could collapse at any moment. Ray, you're going the wrong way. To reach Stract, don't go down to the village but head south. Those chasing us might suspect we're returning to Stract, so they've probably set up camp at the south gate. There's no need to move according to their predictions. Half the continent is Stract. As long as we don't head north, we'll eventually reach Stract. Christian, no longer opposing, followed Ray closely. A few days later, they reached a town. Looking down from the mountain, the village seemed busier than Ray had imagined. This allowed him to buy hair dye to hide their distinctive blonde and platinum hair. Christian had also grown a thick beard. They now looked like beggars. Ray, is it safe to wander around with dyed hair? Christian asked. Don't worry. No one is paying attention, Ray replied, seeing a crowd ahead. Curious, Ray pushed through while Christian, worried, followed. They were shocked by the wanted posters displaying their portraits with a special reward. 500,000 gold for a finger, 1 million gold for a foot, but they had to be captured alive. Christian stood frozen, staring at the poster, his face turning pale. After leaving the market, they rested. Seeing the wanted posters affected your mood, Christian noted. Of course, His Majesty wouldn't act so cruelly. But why do you care about Rit Cat's cruelty after betraying him? Do you now want to play the victim? Christian stammered, unable to speak further. Ray, not wanting to disturb Christian, the only one helping him now, fell silent. The wanted notice demands we be captured alive, so we still have a chance. Even if caught, we won't be killed immediately. Ray began to seriously inquire about the current situation in Stract after Crown Prince Levanov, a highly supported figure, was murdered. The people's outrage reached its peak. The 11th Prince Eric was confirmed to be the culprit. The motives and circumstances were clear, leading to his swift execution, but the Emperor of Stract actively protected Prince Eric. Eventually, Grand Duke Kinlo was condemned as the culprit, but many knew he was just a scapegoat. Iefeso and Stract even went to war a few days ago. If both the Crown Prince and the 11th Prince died, the royal bloodline would end, making the future unpredictable. The Emperor must think about the country's future more than avenging Levanov. Christian stopped and asked Ray, "Isn't the 11th Prince the one who killed you? Maybe I was killed by Eddie?" Christian was surprised by the name Ray used for the 11th Prince. That was in the past. How is Stract recently? Not well. Since the current emperor took the throne, it's been a violent reign. There's never a day without bloodshed, making it hard for the country to find peace. A violent reign? That kind boy. Ray was astonished. The Emperor Eric I know was far from kind, Ray laughed. That must be his true nature. Currently, there's no need to worry about Stract. Ray decided to help Zik reorganize LFE. Does that mean you'll help His Majesty? Didn't you say it wasn't your concern? I've thought it through. If we make mistakes, it won't just be Zik's trouble but a problem for the entire country. Did you just think of this? Ray didn't answer. He looked at the fountain, atop which was a beautifully carved stone dragon statue. I've never seen a dragon. Such luck has never come to me. His way of speaking was peculiar, as if he'd seen everything except dragons. Ray was startled by Christian's keen insight. Suddenly, a man rushed in, hitting Ray hard, causing him to fall. Christian helped him up. The man sneered, "Bad luck." Ray's cloak had fallen, revealing marks on his neck. The man pointed at Ray and shouted, "Wait a minute. These are the branding marks of a sexual slave. A child just off milk falling to the bottom of society." Christian was furious. It would be easy to defeat these two men, but to avoid attention, Ray signaled Christian to stay calm. "Slaves? Why are they here like beggars? Who is your master? Why aren't you speaking? Maybe they're running away," the young man whispered to the older man. There's no news about runaway slaves. Such information usually comes to us immediately. He pondered before grabbing Ray's chin with interest. Let's take this boy. He looks valuable. We're lucky. Just in time for the upcoming auction. Examining Ray's unusual injuries, they decided to have him treated first. Christian wondered, "What are you thinking?" "Just follow me," Ray said. "What are you whispering about?" "I'm asking my brother to carry me," Ray replied, clinging to Christian's back, looking frail. In a meeting with the nobles, Grand Duke Massey declared, "Northern bandits are causing trouble again. They arrogantly demand to trade." Rit Cat's orders were futile. "Tell them we allow trade," causing the nobles to chatter. For years, Efeso had conquered surrounding nations during the decade-long Great War. However, the northern icy regions and small islands remained unconquered as Efeso had no interest in the snowy Northland. Yet, rare fish from the glaciers were highly traded in Efeso, while Northland's minorities needed abundant grain from LFE, maintaining a friendly relationship. Allowing trade might prompt other groups to demand autonomy. The Massey faction opposed trade, while the royal faction supported it, leading to years of conflict. Rit Cat's sudden decree permitting trade angered the Massey faction. Nobles who once supported Zik couldn't voice opposition due to the abrupt and risky decision. Rit Cat, frustrated, slammed the table. "Allow trade. If the Massey faction is dissatisfied, lead troops to suppress Northland. If so, I'll follow your will." Rit Cat challenged, "Has everyone heard clearly? I permit trade. I will not tolerate any opposition." A noble dared to speak. "Your Majesty is forcing this. Why must you impose on the Massey faction?" Crown Prince Lu feigned death and was reincarnated as a slave named Day in the enemy's Fee's empire. Worse, Day caught the eye of Emperor Zik and was pulled into the palace to serve him as a slave. Receiving the favor of Zik made Day a thorn in the side of many. With memories and wisdom from his past life and the dignity of a trampled emperor, Ren always sought to escape from Zik. However, with his current weak body, Day faced many difficulties. Could he gain freedom and uncover the truth about his death? In his past life, both he and his companion had suffered imprisonment and became slaves of the enemy forever after Zik's harsh execution. An unsatisfied noble had become increasingly discontent, waiting for a chance to suppress the royal authority. When Zik coldly asked the responsible party about Christian and Ray, the man shook his head and stammered that he had heard reports from everywhere but received no reliable information. Zik cast a sharp, cold glance at him and said with a harsh tone, "You still haven't found them? Isn't it because you people are taking too long?" The man tried to defend himself, saying he was doing his best. But before he could finish, Zik had already decapitated him. No one had time to react, and blood splattered across the floor. "Useless. Clean this up," Zik said before turning and leaving. "Your Majesty." The voice of Chi Rak made Zik stop, seeing the decapitated corpse. Despite his fear, Chi Rak continued, "Your Majesty, I have something important to discuss with you. Please give me a little time." Zik remained silent and ignored Chi Rak's words. Angrily, Chi Rak shouted, "Your Majesty, what are you doing?" Zik then spoke, "Chivak knows who helped them escape." Chi Rak's heart raced. How does father know? Unsure of what to do next. He knew that his mother and grandfather were plotting against his father and wanted to make him emperor. He had mustered all his courage to come and tell his father this important news. Chi Rak reassured himself. "Lift your head up, Chi Rak." He stammered, "Do you have evidence?" Suddenly Zik asked, "How old are you now?" "You are the same age as my son, yet you don't know." Chi Rak hesitated and replied, "I am 15, a child. I think if I just shout like a child, everything will be resolved." Despite the ridicule, Chi Rak didn't back down and continued to yell, "So His Majesty is wasting time looking for a runaway slave. Even though I am young, I understand that this is not the way." Zik, furious, shouted, "How many chances have I given you? Still, you don't understand how reckless your actions are." Losing his composure, Giết stormed towards Chi-rak, who was startled and retreated in the study room. Many had died in the palace for angering Giết, but Chi-rak had never thought he would be among them. 2 soldiers immediately stood in front of Chi-rak, but Giét's sword flashed and took 2 lives in a single swing. At that moment, only Chi-rak remained, enraged and tearful, while Giết raised his silver sword and struck with a loud clash of metal. Giét's sword was blocked, grinding teeth and forcing it back with his own sword. Daring to raise a sword in front of His Majesty, "Please spare me," Chi-rak pleaded, but it was in vain. Eventually, Giết lowered his sword, indicating that he no longer intended to give warnings. Then he turned and left, leaving Chi-rak trembling with fear. When he saw his father leave, he shouted, "Your Majesty, I really have something to tell you. You must listen to me. If you ignore me like this, you will regret it." However, there was still no response. Chi-rak clenched his fists. "From now on, I will never approach father again." Some time later, after the 2 auction hunters had treated Ray's wounds, he had recovered quite well. He took Ray's hand and said, "Indeed, spending a little money made it as good as new. It should fetch a good price." Day stared at him in silence. The man shouted, "This one is becoming more and more arrogant. I want to correct that behavior, but since we have a distinguished guest today, I'll let it go for now." He walked to the door, then turned and pointed at Christian, adding, "Your house too." After the man left, Christian asked Day if he had recovered. "I plan to stay here until I am fully recovered. But it seems there is an upcoming auction, so we must act soon." Behind the door, a young slave peered in and said, "Hello, Lai, Uncle Seto. Come in, please." De noticed the new wounds on the boy, probably from a recent beating. "I heard the slave market in our town is quite famous, with many distinguished guests coming from afar." "Yes, I've heard of it too. I hope many people come and sell quickly. Lord A is very terrifying." The boy winced from the pain of his injuries. Day hurried over to check on Beto's serious wounds. "Why were you beaten?" Day lifted the boy's shirt, revealing his skinny body covered in fresh, bloodied whip marks. Bender sobbed, "Lord A doesn't like my freckles. I can't do anything about them." Day turned to Christian and said, "That person is indeed the worst trash. You should do something before leaving." Just then, the door swung open, and Lord A yelled, "I told you not to gather noisily. Today's guest is very important." Another person spoke, although, "How rude in front of Baron Barroom." Day froze upon hearing the name Barroom and peeked out the door. Previously, he had heard about this person during the processing of Giét's records. Baron Barroom had the ability to be promoted to the Ministry of Finance. Giết recognized this but did not want to cause any disturbances because Baron Barroom was from the Marquis of Baia Denver. The cold-hearted person looked into the room, then grinned maliciously. He opened the door and cheerfully said, "Baron, there is a quite good slave here. Would you like to take a look? I will stay here for a few days and choose slowly, so please don't rush me. I absolutely have no such intention. I just want to invite you to have a look." Inside the room, Christian worriedly said, "Zane, this inn is familiar to me. If we stay here, we'll be quickly discovered. So we need to leave immediately." Just as the door opened, 3 people entered the room. Baron Room aggressively kicked the person, Beto. The foreigner raised his finger and used magic to create a gust of wind, slamming the door shut, which surprised everyone. Christian recognized the signal from Ray. He quickly grabbed the scissors on the table, thrust them into the neck of Rich, and then swiftly grabbed Baron Room's face, slamming it onto the ground. Meanwhile, Day covered Beto's mouth to prevent him from screaming. Day smiled and said, "It's quite a coincidence to meet here." Baron Room, astonished, stammered, "Why are you here?" Day released Beto, gestured for silence, and replied, I had to come here for free treatment because of someone's trouble. Baron Room, angry, shouted, How dare you speak to me like that in my presence? Don't speak so disrespectfully, slave. Day sneered, still pretending to be noble? You should be the one speaking politely. I'm fed up with being treated like a slave by those who are beneath me. Baron Room was momentarily confused and then stammered, Are you a slave of His Majesty? No, you're an assassin disguised as a slave. Why should I be polite to someone like you? Because your guesses are wrong. While Baron Room struggled to free himself, Day added, It's too noisy, Christian. Cut off his right hand. Christian promptly followed the order. He plunged the scissors into the right wrist of Baron Room. He screamed loudly, and then only silence remained. Baron Room's face turned pale, and he looked at Christian and said, Why are you following his orders? What a pity for someone like you. Why did you betray His Majesty? Day approached and pulled out a chair. There's something I want to ask. The Emperor is ruling terribly. Meanwhile, Marquis Vying Den had joined the Queen's faction. This situation could be a great opportunity for you, one of Marquis Vying Den's subordinates. Why are you still here? Baron Room was silent for a moment and then said, In front of the Marquis, Vying Den advised us to be cautious and observe the current situation. The Marquis was displeased with my opinion and sent me here to buy a useful slave. In short, I was dismissed. Day asked, Still be cautious? I told him that His Majesty was not someone who would easily collapse. Therefore, we need to be more careful. The people killed by the Emperor were all low-ranking nobles and servants under the Queen's orders. He hasn't dealt with the key figures yet. The Emperor, respected by the people, is ruling terribly. However, the source of this might be due to the commander of the Imperial Guards, who was the Emperor's most trusted person and suddenly betrayed him. Baron Room cast a glowering glance. As for Christian, Ray had gathered much important information. Thanks to this encounter, Day stood up and addressed Baron Room. In summary, the Emperor's intentions are questionable, and we should continue to monitor the situation. But Marquis Vying Den has become furious and dismissed you, despite being someone he cherished. What does Marquis Vying Den intend to do with the Emperor after dismissing you? Has the Queen's faction made a significant decision? Although Baron Room tried to hide his emotions, Day detected his tension. Christian exclaimed, Could they really be plotting a rebellion? Ray continued, Indeed. Who knows when their heads will fall under the sword of the Mad Emperor. Therefore, the Marquis Vying Den wants to act swiftly. Besides, by monitoring if there truly is a rebellion, we will naturally find out. Let's go. Christian said hesitantly. Why not kill me? Day, while rummaging for useful items to take, said, I don't hold a grudge against you. In fact, I have a good impression because I appreciate talented people. Day smiled and continued, If I had to say, the Emperor is better than the Queen right now. You've come to a quiet place away from everything. So think it over. After Christian released Oldthu, who was pale and clutching his bloodied arm, Day carried Beto and asked him if he had been bullying him every day. Right? I'll handle everything, so just tell me what you want me to do with him. Do you want me to beat him? Peter angrily shouted, You scoundrel! Kill him. It's not good for a child to have to decide between killing or saving a life. Day reassured Peter and looked at Christian. In the end, Baron Room's fate was the same as the one we killed earlier. Day handed Peter to Baron Room and then left with Christian. Day felt refreshed, stretched, and breathed in the fresh air. After a long time, Christian followed behind, intending to hold Day's hand but hesitated midway. Noticing this but saying nothing, Christian suddenly spoke. Day, what are you thinking? From the start, weren't you planning to return to stress immediately? Day replied, Yes, I didn't plan to return to stress right away. I truly appreciate your help, but that doesn't mean I will tell you everything. You mean nothing to me. Christian was stunned but remained silent, just standing there. Looking at Day, Christian developed personal feelings for him. But even the thought of touching him made Christian hesitate and never grow greedy. Despite betraying Zik, he remained devoted to this emperor. Day guessed the reason Christian protected him. From the beginning, I knew you were still loyal to Zik. So why did you help me escape? It's like betraying Zik. Christian remained silent, and Day turned away. If you don't want to talk, I won't force you. Even if I ordered you, you probably wouldn't speak. I know that Zik's voice is something you cannot forget. Day paused. It's been over 10 years since that person died. He is someone I can't help but remember. Therefore, both the Emperor and I can't take our eyes off him. If he had decided not to kill the community, he should have protected you with all his strength. Even if turning his back on everyone, this half-hearted attitude, my monarch isn't. Why did you run away with me? Christian tightened his grip on his sword and continued, it was just a momentary chaos. I intended to distance myself from you so that His Majesty could regain his sanity. Until then, I will protect you with my sword. You will protect me? Day said as he looked up at the reddening sky at dusk. If one cannot remain indifferent to things that make the heart weak, one must find other ways to protect what is important. But I clung to Zik's hem, begging for mercy in a contemptible manner. I had always thought that even if I were thrown into a ditch, my pride would never be disgraced. But that day, I threw my pride into the ditch myself. The day I hunted the last magical beast and touched the magic stone, I made the worst choice instead of the best. I did things that couldn't be undone, crying and begging, trapped in emotions and making foolish mistakes. This mistake must be resolved by both Zik and me. The cold and long winters of Fez were coming to an end. During the transitional period, Zik continued his slaughter and violence. The capital was drenched in blood. No one was left to defend the emperor. Don Fayu came every day to persuade Zik, but the result was only despair. Don Fayu couldn't understand why both Zik and Christian suddenly. Don Fayu heard a loud noise and looked outside. Hundreds of soldiers surrounded the palace. Don Fayu sneered, it's a rebellion. But I'm not too surprised. Don Fayu immediately ran downstairs. The palace was easily suppressed, but it was hard to believe that Prince Chi-rak led the rebel forces. Chi-rak shouted, find the emperor first. His Majesty is not well mentally and physically, so escort him with the utmost care. Absolutely do not be disrespectful. Don Fayu laughed. The Crown Prince has grown up like this. Huh? However, the day Crown Prince Chi-rak gains the upper hand, this country will perish. Don Fayu drew his sword. No matter how fallen the emperor was, he couldn't stand by idly. Having sworn loyalty, he had to claim 30 rebel heads. Even if he died, it would be worthy of his name. While Don Fayu decided to charge, suddenly, among the rebel crowd, a loud voice rang out from the enemy's side. The rebel forces were attacked by newly arrived knights. Don Fayu was bewildered. He didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed, Crown Prince Chi-rak, you who dare to lead a rebellion, are you ready to pay for this? The Duke of Ganjie-Mut, leading a troop of knights from Don Fayu's family, joined the forces and defeated several rebels. He then asked, Duke, what is this about? This is His Majesty's order. I have secretly prepared to eradicate the traitors. Zik has ordered Duke Ganjie-Mut to kill the traitor son. Thus, the Queen's faction was confident about the destruction of the Ganjie-Mut family and didn't pay attention to him. But in reality, the Duke had prepared the army and carried out the Emperor's secret order. Just then, Emperor Zik appeared majestically, entering with a glowing sword in hand, and everyone became still. Has the Emperor gone mad? Zik shouted, no rebel shall leave my palace alive. The royal knights' morale surged, quickly clearing the rebel forces. Chi-rak was also escorted away in a stunned and pale state. Don Fayu, annoyed, looked at Zik and thought, so you intentionally staged this to trap the Queen's faction. Zik laughed at Don Fayu's question. He was almost driven mad by Ray before leaving. Zik declared, Now is the time I must take responsibility for my actions. Bring Ray to me safely. After leaving the slave market, they headed to the neutral country APEC, located between Stress and Fees, to shorten their travel time. They chose to cross the Chrome Mountains. Confident in their abilities, they exhausted a lot of energy battling a horde of goblins. After reaching the village, the two found an inn to rest. Christian placed a few coins on the table and said, as if giving an order, I will stay here for a night. Give me the cleanest room. The innkeeper cheerfully got up. Yes, please wait a moment. I will prepare it right away. Seeing Christian not cautiously concealing his identity as before, Day laughed and said, Are you venting your frustration this way after struggling through the Chrome Mountains? This doesn't seem like you at all. I just can't endure rudeness. Besides, you've been exhausted by the goblins, and your condition will only worsen, so you need to rest. When the room was ready, the innkeeper led them. Everyone in the town seemed strange. Day asked, Innkeeper, the atmosphere in the town is too gloomy. Is something happening? The innkeeper whispered, There is news that the crown prince is in rebellion, and war is imminent. Christian was shocked and said loudly, What? Day raised a hand to calm him and asked, How is the prince's rebellion going? The emperor arrested everyone on the same day, but in the area that was once the Adelmon kingdom, some senior officials have demanded freedom. It's insane to demand the release of the rebellious prince. The two returned to their room. Day took off his coat and flopped onto the bed, then asked, Is Adelmon the small principality just above the neutral country APEC? Yes, Adelmon surrendered to Fees at the end of the Conquest War. Now, the former subjects of the Old Kingdom have been granted titles and govern that area. Day lay down tiredly. The former subjects of the Old Kingdom. After all, their desire to restore Prince Chirac is just an excuse. The regime is in chaos, and they want to take this opportunity to secede and be independent. It sounds absurd, but it might be troubling for Zik, as it clearly shows how his power is being undermined. Day, exhausted, closed his eyes and drifted into sleep. Christian intended to pat Day's head, but then held back. Sleep well, Day. He didn't know how long he slept, but when he jolted awake, he saw a mysterious man dressed in black standing at the door. The man said to Ray, Come here. Who are you? Britain asked cautiously. With the man were about 7 others outside. The man said, I came here on the Emperor's orders. Day smiled coldly, So it's Zik's doing. This matter is the work of Baron Barroom. He informed Rich Catbit. You are here, and Day calmly asked from the bed, So what? Have you found my whereabouts and plan to take me back like a nobleman? We are not here to capture criminals, but to discuss an urgent matter. So please be quiet and follow me. Day smiled and replied, Tell the Emperor that those who feel regret should come and find me themselves. I have my own schedule, and if you request me to go here and there, so be it. Christian spoke up, Ray, if these people were indeed sent by the Emperor, he must have thought immediately. Ray interrupted, So what? What he thinks has nothing to do with me. Britain did not give up and continued calling. Day frowned and told him, You already know the Emperor's feelings. There is nothing to criticize about you being a loyal servant of the Emperor. I was trying to figure out how to part ways with you. Now it's better. Go with them and return to your sovereign. Christian tightened his grip on his sword and said, I can't do that. The mysterious man continued to persuade, It would be best if you listened if you want to protect your parents' lives. Day remained unmoved. Interesting. Now there's this proposal as well? I left that place myself. Does the Emperor of Hui not understand what this means? Why can't you be convinced? The mysterious man gave his final words. This is the last chance. Do you believe you will not regret it? Go back and report to the Emperor and hear Ray's response. The man stood there for a moment. Then the group withdrew without taking any action. Day asked Christian, Why aren't you going with them? Don't you know why I can't do that? Oh, it's because I cannot escape Zik, so you have to follow and supervise, right? Christian did not answer, as Jean was always right. A few days later, as they approached the neutral country, Day turned to Christian and said, "Christian, how long will it take to return now? If you are still a loyal servant of Rich, I cannot go with you." Christian replied seriously, "I have said that I cannot do it." Seeing Christian's determination not to return, Day said, "In that case, you must swear by your honor. What you are about to see is the secret of Strad. I don't want Eo Phaser to know. That's why I want you to leave. I came all this way thanks to your help. I didn't think much of bringing you here, so there's no other way." Christian listened in silence and then said firmly, "I swear by my honor. All right, from now on, you must not go alone. Stay close to me and don't get lost," Day instructed. Christian did not question further. He silently nodded and followed behind. The two of them crossed through the forest. After a while, Ray spoke first. "Do you know why only the Apex Kingdom can exist as a neutral country? Isn't it because it's fortunate to be situated between the influence of Strad and Eo Phaser?" "That's true," Day replied. "But more importantly, in the past, I accidentally discovered something near the neutral country." Abek Britain handed Day a towel to wipe his face and asked, "What is that?" "Only someone with all 5 senses perfected can perceive this area differently from others. Until now, I am the only one who has sensed the difference in this place. But perhaps a master of swordsmanship might also notice, right?" Day explained. A strange light emitted from somewhere. The ordinary forest suddenly transformed in an astonishing way. Christian asked in amazement, "Day, what is this place?" Suddenly, from high above, someone was spying on them from the trees. A girl with slender, agile legs landed on the ground, her long and pointed hands raised like a little puppy. Then, other strange beings similar to her appeared one after another. Christian couldn't believe his eyes. It was like a dream, as he didn't expect to see elves up close. About 20 years ago, I accidentally discovered this elf village while exploring around the neutral country. At that time, I felt the same way. Day smiled and said. At that moment, an elf named Cha Rit Geo approached them. "I pay my respects to the one who broke the barrier within the house." Day replied, "There's no need to express it a second time." Cha Rit Geo, looking doubtful, said, "My name is Levinod Van Chat. Although it's been a long time, an intelligent but somewhat cruel person should remember." People began to murmur. They did not believe it, as in front of them was a much younger man. But the item needed was in their hands. He could not return without it. Karis Bio angrily shouted, "How dare this person lie in front of the descendants of that frog? You are not Levinod Valcott." Cha Rit Geo raised his staff and gently touched the ground, directing a great force toward the two of them. Then, Cha Rit Geo lowered his voice and said, "Go back. This is not the place for you." Before he could finish speaking, Ray shouted, "I am Levinod Van Chat. Do you think I came here to lie?" Cha Rit Geo narrowed his eyes and then calmly said, "The person indeed has a face similar to Levin, but that doesn't prove anything. Levinod Van Chat is dead." Cha Rit Geo the Great said, "You are right, but I am sure I am Levin Van Chat. That is the truth. Cannot be denied." Cha Rit Geo said, "You should provide evidence that can prove it. The evidence must be special and noble." "Why should we prepare evidence?" Day asked. "This is important to prove the truth." "Are you afraid?" The descendant of the great Akira. Other elves began to murmur at the audacity of the person in front of them. Cha Rit Geo glanced at Ray and then said, "I will discuss this matter with the wise elves in the village. In the meantime, you may spend your free time wherever you wish." After everyone left, Christian asked why they accepted the man's pressure. Day replied, "Christian, don't consider them as humans. They are elves, and their way of thinking is somewhat different from humans. Akira is considered the ancestor of the elves, a god, a tree, and the truth. Therefore, they are extremely sensitive to the word truth. If things don't go as planned, I will take an elven item and use it as proof of myself. Day said while taking off his shoes and wading into the water. What are you proving with that? Christian asked. Day picked up some stones from the water and replied, I'm not joking. Miscellaneous items that are considered trivial to elves can be regarded as unique treasures by humans. Those who possess such treasures are granted legitimate rights. Especially, the one who holds the legendary sword becomes the king. Aren't such stories quite common? Britain realized the implication of the words. You've used elven artifacts before and propagated them as legendary treasures. Day smiled, placing a finger on his lips. As long as the truth remains hidden, that's fine. I emphasize once again that you should keep this place a secret. This is where the magic of Strath can develop explosively. While they were talking, they suddenly saw a young elf hanging upside down from a tree branch, landing gracefully on the ground. The little elf said, You're lying. You're not the real Levin Van Rat. You're an imposter. Day approached and patted the little girl's head. I'm really the real Levin Van Rat. Narin. The girl was surprised by this familiar action but then became angry, shouting, Humph! You must have heard my name from the real Levin Van Rat. A child like you can never be like that wonderful person. The girl's words were quite damaging to Ray. Meanwhile, Christian chuckled. Narin, almost all ordinary people in the outside world are of similar height to me. They're all children. Narin continued to shout, That's none of my business. No matter what, you'll always be a child. Though it was just childish stubbornness, Day felt oddly emotional. His height and smaller stature compared to Levin Van Rat made him worry. Day's growth phase had ended, but he didn't understand why he hadn't developed much. At that moment, Narin's mother arrived, hugging the girl and apologizing sincerely. I'm sorry for my daughter's behavior. Narin's mother was somewhat excessive, and Day smiled and said, It's fine. She's just a playful child. However, the mother's words were shocking. Didn't you know? The words of elves have power. Christian worriedly asked, Does she mean that Day will not grow anymore? The woman awkwardly laughed and said, That's not true. The power of elven words is not that strong. With a nutritious diet and plenty of exercise, you'll definitely surpass the power of elven words. 10 days had passed, and Day suffered significant damage from a child's prank. They were warmly welcomed and stayed at Narin's house as compensation. Day continued to reassure himself that he could still grow taller. Narin, who liked men with outstanding qualities, clung to Christian all day and asked him, Is that person the real Levin Van Rat? Don't call him that. He has a beautiful name, Ray. He's definitely Prince Lavanos. The girl asked, Then are you a knight of Levin Van Rat? She continued, Levin Van Rat brought many people here before, and they were all knights of existence, because Levin Van Rat. They were all wonderful and majestic people, so I liked them. Why is it only you now? Day listened silently to his feelings and said, It's not like that. He's not even a knight of mine. Christian hesitated. Before he could answer, Reno impatiently ran off. After she left, Christian had a somewhat strange expression. Day asked, What's wrong with your expression? Christian replied, It's nothing. Don't misunderstand. Even if I don't have loyal followers like in the past, I don't feel aggrieved. I'm very satisfied with you because of your patience and strength, and I want to make you mine. Day leaned down and lifted Christian's chin, smiling as he said, Many have sworn loyalty to Zik. I just regret not being able to make you mine. You don't need to show that gloomy face. On the contrary, receiving such high praise from me should be encouraging, not discouraging. Your hand has been taken by Christian. You're satisfied with me and want to make me yours. You know what I'm thinking. So are you trying to provoke me with those words? Christian looked directly at Day. Day was annoyed and immediately pushed Christian's hand away. I know you have personal feelings for me, but how come you still haven't betrayed Zik? Christian unexpectedly said, If I said I would betray him? Christian grabbed Day's shoulders. If I betray him, would you accept this body as it is, not as a knight? He couldn't bear to hear more. Day said, "Stop these matters. Zik alone is enough." A silence followed, and then Christian lowered his head and said, "Yes, you're always right. I will never betray His Majesty. So even if I think about it every day and come up with countless possibilities, it still doesn't make sense." Day looked at Christian, who stood there dejectedly. As Christian said, unless he ceases to be the Emperor's loyal servant, it remains an unresolved issue with no timely solution. Narin arrived and opened the door, shouting, "Lord Rist-geo calls for you." Many elves have been waiting there. Day asked, "What did Lord Rist-geo decide?" "Lord Rist-geo, in the 10 days of moonrise and sunset, we have exchanged wisdom many times and concluded that we cannot predict the truth." This was also Ray's prediction. Lord Rist-geo continued, "You should climb to the top of the 6th peak of the Brahm Mountains by the end of next month. If you tell the truth, you will receive proof." Lord Rist-geo slammed his staff on the ground. Elves never speak nonsense. They have a custom of gouging out eyes and cutting out tongues for violators. So surely there will be something horrifying waiting. Day smiled and said, "Let's go, Christian." After leaving the Abek Mountains, Day encountered those mysterious people again. The man handed Day a letter, saying it was the final message from His Majesty. Day removed the seal and opened the letter. Zik said there was a way to end the civil war. If Day helped him, he would quickly end the chaos. Therefore, he should return and give him power. If he refused, half a month later, the parents and all the slaves of the 0 family members would be executed. Day read the letter and crumpled it up. He wasn't worried but mocked. How many times does this scoundrel intend to repeat this? How long will he keep threatening to kill before actually doing it? He said to the others, "I refuse Rist-geo's request. I will not accept the request to return before that." Half a month after the clear declaration, Day threw the letter on the ground and left. Christian sighed and asked, "What are you thinking?" "I have many things to do by the end of next month. I have to climb the Brahm Mountains." According to the elves, Christian replied, "There's still nearly 2 months left." "Isn't there? There's enough time to see His Majesty before then." Day smiled at Christian and said, "Aren't you giving up on him? You're so consistent. Many people say I've already planned everything, so don't worry." Zik looked at the fortress. There was a huge, simple wall approaching. He reported, "The fortress has been closed for 3 days. Some even speculate that His Majesty is feeling fearful." "I think it's time for us to act," Zik said angrily. "The military discipline is too lax. How dare they say I'm afraid?" People were stubborn due to the Emperor's anger. At this point, Baron Room cautiously said, "Your Majesty, I don't think you're afraid but rather waiting for someone." Baron Room, who betrayed Marquis Vying Den just before the rebellion and returned to serve His Majesty, said, "If so, since the agreed day that person hasn't returned. Therefore, you should remove the 0 family slaves from the castle and execute them as promised. Leave the matter to me. I'll handle it." Zik glared at Baron Room and said in a harsh tone, "Have I given you the right to speak on my behalf?" Despite his fear, Baron Room still tried to express his opinion. "I know this is overstepping, but please listen. I think that person isn't heeding His Majesty because you only threaten but don't take action. First, execute his father or mother. If His Majesty shows that you're serious, that person will have to move. Of course, it's also possible that he doesn't care about his parents' lives, so the odds are 50 to 50. Don't you want to bet on that 50% chance?" Zik, hearing this, laughed. "That's the worst way to eliminate the remaining possibility. That kid won't be comfortable aligning with someone who has killed his parents." Baron Bar Room stood up and shouted, reprimanding, "His Majesty has left the army waiting for 3 days for you. If so, you should decide on the worst possible course of action and wait to see the result. Why are you acting so indecisively?" Baron Room is not afraid, but even if he has to die here, he won't let the Emperor make a worse decision. Suddenly Zik spoke, "Day once asked me why I didn't use you. He was certain that you were a valuable person, and he was right. Baron Room's eyes widened in surprise. They had only met once at the slave auction. So how could he recommend you to the emperor? Baron Room hesitated and asked, "Did His Majesty really say that?" Cat confirmed, "Day said it, and if you hadn't seen him up close, you wouldn't believe it." Rich Cat tightened his grip on his sword. Zitk needed Ray's strength to quell the seeds of rebellion. But now Ray had not appeared. Perhaps he had declined the offer. As emperor, Zybeck had to let go of his regret over Ray and make a decision to stabilize the situation. But Zybeck was still stunned. He looked behind him and saw Day striding confidently towards them after a long time apart. That was the first greeting Day made. After some time, Day and Christian looked a bit uneasy, while Day smiled brightly. Rich Cat stood there staring at Ray, then drew his sword and started moving towards them. Seeing this, Day turned to Christian and asked, "What is he doing?" "This is not the time to ask that," Christian replied, anxious. Rich Cat advanced quickly, closing the distance and swinging his sword in front of Ray. Immediately, a transparent shield was erected by Day, who calmly recited a third-level spell to block Rich's sword. The clash between the sword and the shield created a powerful force, causing the shield to crack and the sword to be thrown back. Day taunted, "I have a magical stone in my hand. Are you daring to rush in like this?" The knights, alert and ready to fight, were commanded by Rich Cat to stay still and not interfere. The magical stone in Day's hand began to vibrate, and a cloud of fire formed right in front of him. Rich Cat dropped his sword on the ground and suddenly ran towards Day, despite the blazing fire blocking his path. He did not consider avoiding or neutralizing it. Day frowned. He could have killed Rich Cat, but he chose not to and withdrew his magic. Rich Cat rushed to embrace Ray with both arms. The moment was frozen in time. Day remained in Rich Cat's embrace for a long while, seemingly unwilling to let go. Day gently patted his back as if comforting a child. You missed me so much," Day said. Arizak pushed Day away. "Your method is indeed effective and doesn't take much effort." Day looked around and asked, "Where are my parents? Half a month has passed since the appointment, and yet you still hope they are alive." Ray smiled. Then he punched Zitk in the stomach to vent his anger. "If you use my parents' lives to threaten me again, I will kill you right here." Rich Cat sighed and told everyone to leave. He picked up an apple and said, "Let's get to the main issue, shall we? But first I have a request. If you don't accept it, I won't make any deals." Zitk pointed to the chair beside him and said, "Sit here." Day ignored him and threw the apple towards Rich. "Protect my parents from any danger and don't expect any form of compensation for it. Even if I become your enemy, you must protect them unconditionally." Rich Cat caught the apple and frowned. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're still obsessed with your parents' lives. Isn't it natural for me to use that to keep you in check?" Day replied confidently, "You have to comply with my request." Why should they accept such a ridiculous demand? The two continued to argue inside the tent. Dee approached Rich Cat and then moved closer. "Is it because you like me?" Rich Cat was taken aback by Day's actions and words. Day smiled and said, "Answer me, isn't it?" Rich Cat finally came to his senses. He took Day's hand and agreed to his terms. "All right, you are always so confident. Are you dissatisfied?" "No, you were like this in the past too." "Very radiant and confident," Rich Cat said, holding Day's face and giving him a passionate kiss. The kiss conveyed the longing after so many days apart. After a moment, Day finally managed to push Rich Cat away, rubbing the marks left on his neck, and said, "Let's start talking seriously. What do you believe is the root cause of this civil war?" Rich Cat responded indifferently, because the emperor of a nation was so infatuated with a lowly slave that he lost his sanity. That slave even dared to assassinate the emperor. Instead of executing the entire family, the emperor shielded the slave, which ultimately provided an excuse for the opposition. Ritcat's words made Day feel frustrated. The irony is truly harsh for both myself and you. Zidakat continued in the same tone. Yes, all of this is due to your infatuation with that lowly slave. But the story would be different if you were not just a slave but a special existence worth acquiring. The actions of the emperor would be more understandable. A special existence? Day found this an interesting story. Zidakat continued explaining, you are the only fourth-level mage on this continent. With that power, your existence is already overwhelming. No one can refute your abilities, or rather, it is impossible to refute them by defeating Abraham, known as the Divine Fortress, creating a stage to showcase your worth. If you truly are the Crown Prince of Lennot, hailed as the embodiment of battle, not only will we win, but everyone will be amazed by your performance, and they will admire my foresight in recognizing and valuing you. Ritcat, who was not only impressive in appearance but also had thoughts similar to his own, made Day feel quite intrigued. He immediately responded, all right, I have similar thoughts, so I have no reason to refuse. Ritcat nodded and continued, if the plan succeeds, I will immediately restore the lost reputation, and you will be forgiven for past offenses and gain a new title. I will give you the surname of the infertile Count, who has trained many exceptional mages. Interrupting Zidakat, Day said, the title you mentioned is for me to take the surname of the infertile Count, right? I was once the crown prince and was about to become emperor. Of course, I have no intention of becoming the emperor of LFE, but at the very least, I want to become the sole Grand Duke of LFE. That is what I want. The title of Grand Duke is only given to those from the royal family. Naturally, what you're asking is impossible. Ritcat frowned at the unreasonable demand and replied, that doesn't sound like you at all. It is practically impossible. Day burst out laughing and teased Ritcat, you don't need to adjust this body to human standards. In every era, there are those praised as the embodiment of divine beings, the pioneers who first awaken great powers in the eyes of the ignorant. They are the embodiments of gods. LFE will praise this body and willingly make it a Grand Duke. You said you would astonish everyone. I will make them gasp. After the divine fortress Abraham is destroyed, I will no longer be a human but an embodiment of divinity, Day confidently declared and then left the tent, running outside. All the mage squads had assembled. They were bustling about the upcoming mission. When Ritcat and Day emerged, all attention turned to them. At this moment, Zidakat spoke, all mages have gathered as requested. Now do what you want. Day raised his hand in front of Marquis Goa and said, you are Marquis Goa. The commander of the Star Commander is nothing more than that. Marquis Goa became furious, shouting, Your Majesty, the soldiers are agitated by rumors about this slave. So why does Day mockingly evaluate the great Archmage, also known as the Sage, only to complain without understanding anything? Day was indifferent to the Marquis's current expression and calmly pushed him aside, asking, Count Rungfor is planning a large-scale spell, so I will select 20 mages who can perform second-level spells. How many gallons of magic stones are currently in the camp? Approximately 70,000 gallons. Though surprised, Count Rungford quickly responded, too few. At least 600,000 gallons of magic stones are needed to activate a spell that can be mobilized adequately in 15 days. Right? The Marquis, taken aback, shouted, 600,000 is a number that can only be obtained by mining in the Great Stone Mountains for a year. We even need to recalculate the national defense budget. And you say you will use it for a spell? Ritcat replied, look at what you're doing. You really let him do whatever he wants. Other mages also murmured in discontent. They felt Day's demand was unreasonable. Day sighed and continued, the financial problem can be quickly resolved by eliminating the rebels and extracting their marrow. To capture the impregnable fortress, tens of thousands of soldiers will be mobilized. Tens of thousands of weapons will be used up, and there will be thousands of casualties. You don't know that 600,000 gallons of magic stones are actually much less costly. Amidst the heated debate, Ritcat thought for a moment and decided 600,000 gallons is too much. Day, in frustration, bargained, then 580,000 gallons. Ritcat immediately agreed, signing the paper and issuing an order to prepare 580,000 gallons. Day, still dissatisfied, complained, "You're still cutting the budget. LFE won't die from financial issues, will it?" However, Ziticat was not easily provoked. Listening to the conversation, the marquises were pale. Even with the reduction of 20,000 gallons, 580,000 gallons used in one go was still too much. Seeing this, Ritcat spoke, "Marquis, I understand your feelings, but for now, follow Day's request. His actions are also like my orders." In the end, the Marquis had to yield. Day handed out the prepared papers. "This is the basic structure of the spell. Calculate the detailed value according to temperature, wind direction, and report back to me by midnight today." "How dare a slave speak so audaciously?" Marquis Wyken frowned. He then skimmed through the paper and yelled, "How do you know the formula for the spell? Tell me the truth. Who taught you this knowledge?" Day gritted his teeth, angrily shouting, "Who taught you? How foolish. Who would teach such advanced spell secrets to an assassin just to use it once and then discard it? Takes immense effort and a huge amount of money. How dare you disregard me like this?" The Marquis hesitated for a moment and asked, "If so, who are you?" Day confidently ordered, "If you want to know how amazing this spell is, come quickly and join in this historic moment. Prepare a large and magnificent palanquin, a splendid cloak. It must be so striking that even the rebels will be astonished." Marquis Ritcat asked Day respectfully, "Indeed, your majesty, could you choose my attire?" An altar was set up in front of the solid gates of the Abraham fortress in the east, west, south, and north directions. Offerings to the gods were piled everywhere, with a large palanquin and an escort of soldiers. Day wore pure white clothes, with a white cloak draped over, a hood on his head, looking mysterious like a deity. The rebel troops, curious about the appearance of the person before them, focused their attention on Day. Clearing his throat, Day announced, "Listen up. I am a messenger of the divine. I am here by heavenly command to protect and preserve the empire. If you do not abandon this rebellion, the heavens will punish you." At that moment, Count Luin, in charge of Fort Abraham, clicked his tongue in frustration. "That person is here again," he muttered. Day looked up at him and said, "Count Luin, you should know that offending me is akin to blaspheming the divine." "How eloquent," Luin retorted. "I pity your life. If you don't want to die, you should leave immediately." Meanwhile, the magical stones, hidden as sacrificial offerings, were assembled by Day, who began the ritual. "Divine Spirit, protect the emperor and punish these evildoers." Bazar Luin, unable to endure this any longer, ordered his soldiers, "I can't listen to this anymore. Ready your bows. Are you planning to kill him?" The scene below was quite interesting to watch. A soldier remarked, "How much longer must we witness this?" Annoyed, Luin pulled back his bowstring. At this distance, he was confident he could easily hit his target. However, before the arrow could pierce Day's head, Christian leaped out and used his radiant sword to cut through the air. The arrow broke into 2 pieces and fell to the ground. Christian pulled back and said, "You bastards, do what you want. Abraham is a fortress bestowed by the heavens. You cannot destroy it." Bazar Luin, furious, slammed his hand down. Ray returned to the camp, removing his cloak and asking, "What have been the movements of the rebels recently?" Rich Cat approached, drawing his sword and replying, "The southern nobles have long allied with the Queen's faction and have been opposing me. However, they failed after the rebellion led by the Duke." Maxi Day said, "I'm aware of this. Moreover, I've heard that the remaining southern nobles are trying to ally with the remnants of the Old Kingdom to gain independence." They know they cannot achieve independence with their own power alone and must seek external support. The rebels are using Fort Abraham as a shield to buy time for their negotiations. And that external power is definitely Bratsbeck. Day looked at Rich Cat without speaking. Day smiled and continued, "It's quite interesting. We haven't talked much before. Yet now we're discussing such confidential information." Day poured a glass of wine and handed it to Rich Cat, asking, "Isn't that right?" Rich Cat lowered his eyes and smiled. "Yes, I wish I had done this sooner." The two conversed for a while, discussing the leader of the rebel faction and Baron Barroom. Later, Marquis Goa brought the magical stones. He was still dissatisfied with Ray and now had to witness the intimate scene between the two. His face contorted as he announced, "The 70,000 gallons of magical stones have finally arrived." The drumbeats signaled the start of the battle. Rich Cat, riding a majestic black horse, led 10,000 soldiers. Fort Abraham also tightened its vigilance and prepared to conduct the ritual at the altar again. Divine Spirit, punish those who oppose the Emperor. Count Fuodiluin stood on the grand platform, mockingly saying, "If you are a divine messenger, then I am the son of that deity." The soldiers around him began to laugh, and the mockery spread everywhere. Yet, Day remained undaunted. This was a reaction he had anticipated. Day took out a magical stone from his sleeve. He then clasped his hands and chanted a spell. A dazzling light emanated from Day, accompanied by a loud sound that startled the soldiers, causing chaos and confusion. "What is this?" they exclaimed. Soon, thousands of radiant lights spread out from beneath Day, forming various shapes and inscriptions. "What the hell is this?" Ferdy shouted, panicking. "What is this?" It was too late to realize. Day smiled and recited the spell a second time. A soldier finally recognized it and shouted in panic, "Magic K! It's magic! Those bags are filled with magical stones." Count Fuodiluin's face turned pale. He pointed at Ray and yelled, "Kill him!" The archers immediately aimed to shoot him. The sky darkened as a fierce whirlwind swirled, the heavens responding to the immense power of the magical stones. Arrows continued to be shot but couldn't reach Ray. He boldly declared, "The fools have angered the divine. This is the consequence." Strong winds turning into a fierce storm shaking the fortress walls. After a chaotic scene, Day tossed a magic stone and approached Ritcat. He placed his hand on his chest and solemnly said, "Your Majesty, the path has been opened for 10 days. Proceed." Ritcat walked over to Ray. At this moment, he whispered, amazed, "Aren't you? The spell of stress can achieve this. I never thought it would be used this way, but all the success brings much scandal to both me and you. It's a perfect combination of Day, a lowly slave with the grave crime of assassinating the Emperor, and Ritcat, an emperor infatuated with that slave, doing crazy things." Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit Day, draining his strength and causing him to stagger. Ritcat quickly caught Day and held him. Day moaned, "It's exhausting to use magic on par with a deity." Ritcat suddenly dove in to cover Day's mouth with a kiss. Day's eyes widened in shock. This crazy guy, Day cursed internally, surrounded by many soldiers. Yet Ziticat calmly devoured Day's lips. He thought this guy was really out of his mind. At that moment, the soldiers suddenly raised their fists to the sky, cheering loudly. "Long live the Emperor! May the divine bless Emperor F's! Long live! Long live the Emperor!" What the soldiers saw was not just the Emperor kissing his slave. Their Emperor F's had held the divine envoy, wielded divine power, and made him his own. After breaking the fortress, Abraham, Day was exhausted and fell into a deep sleep until the next morning. Though he didn't want to wake up, he felt something or someone bothering him. He groaned in discomfort, feeling as if even a touch was painful. "Please let me be," Day cried out internally. Eventually, he managed to open his eyes, and was startled to see someone in front of him. It was Ha, the emperor of a country, shamelessly performing such acts in broad daylight. Azadcap answered, "Why should I be ashamed?" he said while kissing Day's foot. Ray kicked Azadcap in the face a few times, but Azadcap endured and got off the bed. "Fortunately, your condition is better, but just to be sure, I will call a divine healer to treat you," Ritcat said, then immediately went out the door. Day stared at his back and then mocked, "If you feel guilty, just say sorry. It's braver than you." After Ray's words, Ritcat stopped, faced Day, and slowly said, "I'm sorry." After the brief apology, Ritcat was silent. Day looked at him and said, "Do you think I'll be satisfied with that?" "Well, you didn't need to apologize from the start," Day said irritably, waving his hand. Day recounted, "When I was a prince, I also once called a child to my bedroom." The child's fearful expression, "I don't actually remember because I didn't care. But if the child was the reincarnation of some royal family, then I should apologize to him." Day laughed loudly and continued, "I tried to kill the Emperor of F's in front of hundreds of people after being tortured. Although I occasionally have nightmares, the price for that crazy act wasn't death but torture. That's what I'm grateful for." Ritcat approached, took Day's hand, and sincerely asked, "So, you mean you can sympathize with what I've done to you recently?" Day, annoyed, pulled his hand back. "Yes, I was also a prince, so I understand that what you're doing isn't unfair, but sympathizing with what you did and whether I accept it now are entirely different matters." Then Day turned back to the bed and said, "You can go now." The sound of hurried footsteps came from behind, and Ziticat appeared with a dagger in hand, heading towards the desk, causing confusion. Watching him, Day's eyes widened in shock. Ritcat raised the sharp dagger and relentlessly plunged it into Day's hand, pinning it to the wooden desk. Ritcat's face contorted in pain from the flesh-tearing agony and broken bones. Day gasped and shouted, "What are you doing?" Ritcat, suppressing the pain, slowly said, "I know that even with treatment, your body won't be the same as before. By doing this, will you feel more at ease? What should be done?" Day laughed and lunged to grab Ritcat by the collar. "Do you like me so much?" he asked. Ritcat pulled out the dagger from his hand, threw it to the ground, and declared, "If it were me, I would tear out my heart and give it to you." Day touched the wound on his hand and said, "In this case, there's no reason for me to suffer alone anymore. I've indulged you too much, so this time I will treat you well. You can embrace me, but I won't accept it the other way around." Day embraced Ritcat, who seemed slightly embarrassed, but then said, "Do as you like." Day smiled mischievously and Ritcat tore the bedsheet to bind his hand. For the first time, Day actively explored and caressed Ritcat's body. He used his other hand to cover his eyes and moaned softly from the ticklish sensation. Day was quite pleased with Ritcat's reaction. "You should also beg," Day said confidently. Ray teased the edge of Riz's ear. He was satisfied with the current expression on Day's face. Groping Riz's trousers, he suddenly jumped up, grabbed Day's hand, and softly called his name. At this point, Day could no longer tolerate it and clutched his head in frustration. The result was that men were not his preference. "Be honest. Is it because my body is like this that you like to touch it? If it were a rough body like Dan Phi, could you still do it?" Riz was stunned and asked, "There are many others like Christian. Why use Dan Phi as an example?" "It's because Christian is very handsome, Riz." Riz sat silently for a while and then suddenly asked, "Aren't I handsome too?" Day gaped in disbelief. "Are you jealous of Christian?" Riz replied, "You're quite charming as well." Day laughed and said. Riz suddenly jumped up, pinned Day down on the bed, and their positions completely reversed. Riz declared, "If you don't do it, I will make you uncomfortable." Day said he couldn't do it. Not that Riz should do it anyway, but Riz hurriedly acted, causing Day to blush just from Riz's touches. Day's hands trembled as he fumbled for the magical stone he had stored in his pocket. Riz said nonchalantly, "If you don't stop, I'll kill you. Throw this aside. Day angrily shouted, What are you doing? Yet Zik remained focused on what needed to be done. I'll try not to hurt you. He even played with the spoon and told Day to call his name. Day gritted his teeth and endured. Riz said, I will stop, but only if you call my name. At this point, Day had no strength left to argue. He screamed, and Riz stopped, saying, Stop, Day. Stop. Don't look, don't hide. Let me see everything. Christian, still inside, was ordered not to let anyone in, making it very difficult to meet. Christian stared at the door for a while and then said, I'll come back later. He turned and left, his hands clenched and trembling. Dan Phi, seeing Riz's sad expression from a distance, guessed that Christian had met Day and left in despair. Dan Phi chuckled and said, I heard that Ray was crushed by the energy of the Emperor. Is that true? Riz frowned and replied, Don't speak so rudely. He's not someone you can speak to casually. Dan Phi's smile faded, and he sighed, Chris, Day is the Emperor's. Don't you remember what I said? Britton walked down the hallway without responding. Then suddenly said, just as you said. Dan Phi was very surprised. He was bewildered. Chris, are you admitting that your feelings for Day are love? Christian hesitated to say something but eventually turned and left. Dan Phi immediately chased after him and asked, Are you truly in love with Day? I don't consider him capable, but he's just a slave. Christian abruptly stopped and replied coldly, He's not a slave with everything Day has shown. Suddenly, a name appeared in Dan Phi's mind. He blurted out, Could it be that Day has a connection with the Crown Prince of the past? Christian responded, He is the Crown Prince of the past. Dan Phi felt confused. It seemed absurd, but if true, it made sense given Ray's abilities and attitudes, as well as the Emperor's actions. Dan Phi shouted, Even so, the issue is whether you like Day. We can't understand why you, the direct descendant of Gudfenjie, would fall for a man and turn your back on your family. Christian, though, was not worried and said, Just adopt him. If that's not accepted, we'll abandon it. Gudfen Gamos is a senator. There's no object I need to consider other than family pride. Dan Phi sighed, Do you think someone doesn't know you're stubborn? That's exactly what you would do. We also like this about you. Yes, you're still you. That will never change. Dan Phi laughed heartily, put his arm around Christian's shoulder, and welcomed him. When he woke up, Day felt a dull ache all over his body. He couldn't imagine how far Riz had gone. However, Day felt he had also experienced and enjoyed it. Last night, he had been too enamored with men. Thinking of this, Day jolted awake with the shocking truth. Riz lay beside him, holding him and saying, Lie down a little longer. Something is touching below. Day angrily hit Riz a few times. Finally, dealing with the Abraham Fortress had concluded. Everyone wanted to continue eradicating the rebel forces. Those words were entirely correct. However, Day still had tasks to complete. He said, Your Majesty, you must now climb the peak and the sixth peak of the Chrome Mountains. The eradication of the rebels can wait. Everyone was extremely confused. They whispered and discussed among themselves. Only Britain understood Day's meaning. Day continued, Your Majesty, you must listen. According to me, you should climb to the peak and the sixth peak as instructed by the Elven Patriarch. There is definitely something called a treasure there. I want them to witness and be spectators for the moment I become the master of the treasure. Day appeared mysterious and said, The rebels can be eliminated at any time, but the day you can climb the peak and the sixth peak is a day that only happens once. You must follow because Your Majesty, seeing the Emperor easily agree, some revived names who opposed the plan were questioning why he disregarded the enemy and insisted on climbing the mountain. Moreover, since he was a divine envoy and not a human, didn't he think about the soldiers exhausting themselves from climbing the mountain? Essentially, his words were not wrong. However, Day was displeased with that impolite attitude. Day replied briefly, Now is not the time to discuss specifics. Naturally, he did not accept that answer. At that moment, a mage spoke up, in defense of Ray. There's no way a divine envoy would talk about climbing the mountain without reason. Day realized that it was the mage who had previously opposed gathering a large number of magical stones to break the Abraham fortress. However, now he had become Day's ally. He approached Day and respectfully asked, "What exactly do you intend to show us?" Day noticed that not just him but many others were watching him. However, to suppress the skeptics, he had to earn the title of Grand Formula of LFE. Even if he couldn't regain his lost status, he could no longer live as a slave. Day declared, "Although the Abraham fortress has fallen, there are still many who doubt me. Nevertheless, as this is the first time you witness the power of the divine, I will forgive this rudeness. But this time, I want to prove my divinity at the peak." Looking at Zitk and waiting, Zitk immediately ordered, "The divine envoy has shown us much more than expected, and this time you'll see the entire army. Prepare to move out. Once ready, we'll immediately head to the mountain and the peak." Dan Fai was astonished and shouted, "What? You've met the elves directly?" Jai sighed and reminded, "Someone overheard. Lower your voice now, fool." Riz lamented, "A treasure of the elves? You always do unimaginable things." Day confidently replied, "There's no need to be surprised. Have you forgotten I'm a divine envoy?" Then Day pointed at Christian and said seriously, "The hidden max of the elves is a top secret, Christian. You must also keep it secret as you have." Zik, dissatisfied, said, "You plan to recognize the grand formula in EO Fei SSO, but keep the secrets of Trat hidden?" Day mischievously leaned in and whispered, "I'll tell only you a secret. Even if we recognize EO Fei SSO, if it's for the sake of Trat, we can sacrifice our lives." This secret was utterly dull for Rich Cat, as it was no secret to him. Day explained that his purpose for ascending the mountain and making himself visible was to let everyone witness the moment he possessed a treasure and would be honored. To a divine messenger like Rich Cat, this seemed like a mere trick. Day chuckled and clarified, "Sometimes, creating the right theatrical moment is crucial. For example, the Crown Prince spreads rumors everywhere. I am a perfect person who knows everything, but the truth is quite different. Although known as an undefeated general, I have faced defeat in several smaller battles, then blamed my subordinates just like a fallen faith." Rich Cat sighed and said, "Stop. It's better to keep such matters secret." Day teased, "Are you also one of those who are deluded about the Crown Prince?" Day was just joking, but it made Rich Cat very embarrassed. Day laughed heartily. "Really? How cute. Is that why you couldn't take your eyes off me when you first saw me?" As Day was enjoying this new revelation, Rich Cat surprised him by taking his hand firmly. "What's going on?" Day asked. However, Rich Cat remained silent, his face flushed, his expression unreadable. Day did not resist and kept his hand in Rich Cat's, walking side by side. After several days of climbing, they finally reached the mountain peak. Zicket raised his hand to the sky, as if to feel the gust of wind, and said, "Though it can't be described clearly, this place feels quite peculiar, as if something might appear." Day also felt that the place seemed like a different world, and indeed Zicket sensed this peculiarity. Day clapped his hands and announced that there were still 2 days until the end of the month as planned. "Until then, let's rest here." 2 days later, Day woke up early to watch the sunrise from the mountaintop. The designated time had arrived, but there was still no sign of anything. Many people became impatient and dissatisfied. Suddenly, a large shadow appeared behind Ray. Several gigantic dragons were slowly flying toward them. The crowd cheered, "Dragons! Oh my God! Is this real?" Day was delighted with this arrangement of his father, Rich Cat. The dragons found empty spaces and landed. At that moment, some curious soldiers who touched the dragons instantly vanished. Similar incidents occurred elsewhere, with screams echoing from every direction. Day, astonished, noted that those who had touched the dragons had disappeared. At that moment, the longest gray dragon spoke. Those who are not strong enough should not come into contact with us. With bright eyes, the dragon then asked, "May I ask if you are the leader of this group of dragons? What happened to the soldiers?" The dragon replied, "The title of leader does not suit us. We are advisors to this group of dragons. The missing soldiers have been assimilated into the dragons. A person with a weak ego will be drawn in. Dragons have endless thoughts. The missing soldiers did not die but merged into one with the dragons. However, since they have become a different entity to humans, it is as if they are dead." Day asked, "What happens if a person strong enough comes into contact with the dragon?" The ancient dragon, knowing everything, looked at Day and answered, "You will achieve your goal. Look around here." Day smiled and turned away, saying, "Thank you for your trust." Following the ancient dragon's words, Day glanced around and saw a golden dragon standing out among the others. Day smiled and approached the golden dragon without hesitation. He reached out and touched it. At that moment, the golden dragon turned into brilliant light and flowed into Ray. The soldiers had been assimilated with the dragons, while Ray was able to create his own dragon. At that moment, a black dragon suddenly appeared and landed beside Ray.